Welcome in, Paul.
I used to walk across a stage, and now I have to press buttons and hope for the
Yeah,
best.
yeah. It's like the movie Up. We're just going to get rid of all sort of physical incarnations, and you'll just move around in a chair. Tell us first of all where you are right now.
I am in at my in-laws' apartment in Florida, which is I know a very high COVID zone. I don't think I'm contagious online.
Yeah, I
Um,
think you're good in that regard.
I found I found a place that was on the ocean that was free, um, and where nobody comes because it's summer in Florida, so it's hot and humid,
Hmm.
but really pretty peaceful. And
Okay,
yeah,
good. We're going to get into what you're doing with your life right now. We're going to talk a lot later about something that I know is near and dear to your heart, which is the idea that for any writer to be worth a damn, he needs to let his ego go. But before any of that, I came up with 3 rapid fire questions that I need to know the answer to because I've known you now for like a year and a half, but I've never gotten to ask you these questions. Here they are.
okay.
Checkers or chess?
Chess.
McMurtry or McCarthy?
McMurtry.
See, I knew we would see eye to eye on that. And lastly, De Niro or Pacino?
Oh, that's hard. Um,
Well, that's why I saved it till last.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you. It's De Niro, and I'll tell you why.
I want to know
Um,
why.
because I think they're both fantastic actors. But once I was on a date, and Pacino was sitting um, behind me, and he was looking at my date the whole time. This is years ago, and as a result, the date went very bad.
Oh, yeah. I get.
She
I
was
mean, yeah. I
much
guess.
more mesmerized by Al Pacino looking at her than she was by conversation with me, which should tell you something and hopefully keep expectations in check, really.
Where
It was
was
at
this? What was the
it was
scenario?
at Chianti, a restaurant in LA, and I don't know if it's there anymore, an Italian restaurant, maybe on Melrose.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it's a long story. I won't get into it.
Well, I
But
want to get into it slightly because I want to know.
I thought, to be honest with you, Al, I see that there are 40 participants. I can see no faces. If Al Pacino is among them, I want you to know, I think what you did was wrong.
Do you think were you when you were going into the date? Did you think like I've got this place nailed? Like
Not at
I've picked.
all.
No.
No, I thought it was a pretty good. I heard it was a good restaurant. I don't think I had ever been there. It wasn't like it was my restaurant, and then suddenly became Al's restaurant.
Right. I just mean like, but you thought like I've picked out a great place. I've set up this date the right way.
To be perfectly honest, the date had gone wobbly before we got to the restaurant.
Oh, that's when if it's gonna go wobbly, it's gonna go wobbly early, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say this, and I think this is actually somehow relevant to what I'll maybe be talking about later. But um, I met this woman. I met her briefly. We started to talk on the phone a lot,
Okay.
and we had hours-long phone conversations that were really delightful.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we had, I think, because we were both traveling, I was traveling and she was traveling, and I thought, based on the telephone conversations and on the brief meeting that we had, that this might be the one. And what I learned was that until, it doesn't matter how long you talk to somebody on the phone, the meter starts running when the first date begins.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we were both kind of thrown.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so like this has to do with expectation and confidence and really like life lessons.
Yeah. It's sort
So
of in a time of online dating, which I briefly participated in, but then quickly gave up because I realized that it's true what you're saying in that it's like when you are running and suddenly there's a downhill and your legs kind of get out in front of you, or your body kind of gets out in front of you. That's
Yeah.
what it feels like, where you're like, I'm trying to catch up. We had such chemistry in text form or on the
Yeah.
phone, and you just can't seem to get back to that.
Well, it's a great analogy because running downhill is when you get hurt.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. It's when your legs and your knees and your shins all get messed up.
Yeah.
Like, you're all
Yeah.
out of whack.
You think it's going to be easy, and then it turns out to be a catastrophe. As witnessed, anytime you see that thing of like those people, I think it's in Ireland or Great Britain, or they're like chasing the cheese down the hill, and they start tumbling upon each other. Anyway, this is not a dating podcast, nor is it a podcast about cheese wheels. So let's get to it. So
Okay.
one thing that we talk about a lot, you and I, is the idea of ego in writing. And that made me think about, what have you, Paul Kolsby, who you're currently working on season 4 of Ozark, what have you learned in the last year about writing that surprised you?
Well, I've now been writing on that show for almost 5 years. Let's see, I started in February 2016, and it's now August 2020. So I've been writing February, March, April, May, June, July, exactly 4.5 years, which is interesting because it's almost like, and sometimes we refer there's another writer who's been there the whole time, like I have, and we refer to our freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior years. The day you show up for your first day on a show is like the first day of school at a new school. You sometimes some people, but you definitely don't know everyone. And I'm trying to remember, I did not know anyone that I met on the first day. And right out of the gate, it's just like in a movie or in a pilot, your character begins to get established very quickly. Now, you can subvert whatever that establishment is, and you often do. Like, I imagine that almost every writer at the end of his or her first day on a new show sort of has a reckoning, has a quiet moment where we ask ourselves, do I like the way I was today? Do I think, are there adjustments I'll make? Ask all and basically, who is everybody else on the basis of having spent a day with them? It's really kind of a powerful and I think fascinating process in that way. Sometimes it's, and I'll say this about a writer's room, the dynamics you sit around most writers' rooms, you sit around a table. Of course, we're on Zoom now, but you sit around a table that's like a dining room table. There's food, in the middle of it. It's a motley crew. I mean, any show is a motley crew. The distribution is always shifting, and you're talking a lot at a meal, trying to please either mommy or daddy, depending on who the showrunner is. And as a result, I think that dynamic can often be more interesting than the story that we're breaking or the way we're breaking a story. I don't often say that in the moment, but I think, if you look at the way I like to approach story, it makes sense that I would think that, that the architecture, that backfilling, saying, I know what happens at the end. I'm not sure how we get there. But there would need to be a scene like this here, and a scene like this here, and a scene like this here, and to get there, and we can figure out what those scenes are later, is not the way I like to make story, but it's the way story often gets made. And I don't want me to disparage that way. The architecture is important. One thing I will say about Ozark is the trains run on time. We don't, I think a number of people on Ozark have worked on other shows. I won't name names, but a lot of shows are shit shows, really, where a writer you'll have a break. A writer will turn in an outline and then a script, and the showrunner will say, geez, I think we should completely rethink this episode. That is not at all what happens on Ozark.
Mm-hmm.
We rarely move backwards, and that can be frustrating for somebody like me who often has, for example, in my own work, a realization in between drafts where a third draft of something is often very different from a second draft. Because once I have an idea that I can make something better and by going in a new direction, I can't help myself from going. And I think in a way, so I may not be answering your question, but I'm answering some of mine, and maybe some one participant out there may be wondering this, that just like actors who are scene partners like Jason Bateman and Laura Linney, for who I don't think I'm telling any tales out of school, have very different styles of preparation.
Mm-hmm.
You have to find a way to adjust. Each of them has to find a way to adjust to the other to accommodate their process, because your process and their process are happening simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
So I've learned the short answer to your question is that from the very beginning on this show, more than any other show for me, because this is the longest I've worked on any show, you're constantly aware that circumstances are not what you might call perfect. You don't create the circumstances the way you would if you were writing a screenplay at home. You're constantly adjusting and shifting, and you're pitching. It's like baseball, but worse. I feel like, they say if you hit 1 out of 3 at bats in a career, you go to the Hall of Fame, right?
Mm-hmm.
You bat .333 in your career, you go to the Hall of Fame. I would say if you land 1 out of 10 pitches, if you're actually doing your job and pitching all day, you're gonna go to the Hall of Fame in television. You're gonna work. Mm-hmm. Because what happens to some people is that they pitch and fail, and then they don't pitch for a while, and then they have irritable bowel syndrome, and it just goes downhill from there. Mm-hmm. So it's constant, like getting to the writer's ego. It's a constant. Your ego is brutalized in a writer's room, and it's a good thing. It's by necessity, although it doesn't always feel good. It often feels really pretty awful.
So it sounds to me like, in a way, you're talking about an ecosystem, where let's say we have a simple ecosystem where there's a wolf and there's a deer, and then the deer's going to eat the grass, and then there's fungi or whatever else. And the deer may want to live a certain way, but he's like, well, I got to worry about this wolf, and I got to go eat this food. And so it's figuring out like how to kind of exist in that, and then also excel, right? Like you have to first figure out, how do I survive or succeed in this room and in this ecosystem? And then, best case scenario, I get to start to contribute to the show.
Yeah. I think, it's interesting because in an ecosystem, in a predatory ecosystem, certain animals are looking for other animals to feed on, mm-hmm. and careful to stay away from animals who might feed on them. And there is that sort of kill or be killed feeling sometimes. Much of it a personal projection. Nobody's killing anybody. And some people mm-hmm. are nicer than other people. And some of the nice people are really not so nice. Mm-hmm. And some of the people who seem jerky are pretty honest, and what you see is what you get. So, I think the important thing to remember, and one of the things coming back to humility, is that my job is to serve the show. My job is to make my boss's job easier, and it's to and when I do that, and when I live that way, everything mm-hmm. goes really smoothly. When I feel like my job is to shine or to be a star, to make the studio or the network think that I'm the best, most talented mm-hmm. person in the room, which is everybody, scripts go to the network with your name on them. So, and theoretically, if there were a writer who's far better than the showrunner, the network is going to be aware, because the showrunner is not going to rewrite that person's script to make it lousy so that they all so nobody knows who's better or worse, Mm-hmm. my boss is pretty humble guy who knows when he sees good writing and praises and protects good writing and doesn't
Hmm.
feel like everything needs to be packaged.
So, you mentioned humility. You mentioned a boss who recognizes when things are good. It's fitting, I think, that we're talking about this issue of ego and humility for me personally, because I just started. I don't know if you've seen this book at all, but the David Brooks book, The Second Mountain, where he talks about how most people go through in life a first mountain, which is very ego driven, like I wanted to start a business or succeed and be a
Right.
professional basketball player or whatever it is. And then they realize like that doesn't actually make them happy. They get to the top of the mountain, they realize like, oh shit, this isn't as fun as I thought it was going to be. They go into some valley of despair, and it takes them a while to figure out like what makes almost everybody happy is giving back, is being of service, is building community, etc. Um, I wonder, because you and I have talked about this issue of setting aside your ego. What was it? What was the moment when you realized like I have to learn how to put aside my own ego?
I mean, there were many moments. It's kind of like they asked Paul Newman, "What was your big break?" And he said, "Oh, I've had 44 big breaks."
Yeah.
Um,
Was there a stereotypical valley or rock bottom where you realized
well,
like, oh
there was
boy?
a moment where my mentor said to me years ago. He said, "Nothing is ever going to happen for you in this business until you stop giving a shit whether anything happens to you for you in this business." And
Hmm.
somehow that landed. And this idea of I wrote down the David Brooks. That's interesting. That's a really interesting book to me and where I am right now. There are two there, and I'm probably oversimplifying it. I'm not an acting teacher or an actor, but I do know that in Stanislavski, the actor is supposed to know his or her action, his objective at every moment, and that's how natural behavior um, is affected on a stage or in front of a camera. And Sanford Meisner has a different approach where it's to listen, to really listen, to be present for your scene partner, with your scene partner, and really listen to them, and that's the portal to natural human behavior. So they're two very different approaches. And I feel like, the reality is that there's a balance, right? And it comes down to like, capitalism versus socialism too. The truth is that achievement, the personal standard is necessary for achievement, but there's no question that when all I'm thinking about is my own gain, even if I'm writing in isolation, a screenplay, um, ultimately I'm going to come up against a system where other entities in that system, other participants in that system, have their own gains to consider. I mean, it comes down to the fact that this is a truly collaborative medium. I mean, I've heard novelists say the same thing, that being a novelist would be great if you didn't have to kiss so many asses to get your book where it's supposed to be, and listen to so many different people. But I mean, the nature of my business is I never expected to be going to an office every day. I never expected that this is what working in my business would be, but it's just like, there's no room for an egotist.
Hmm.
You'd be kicked out the door. What happens is, and it's fascinating to me, is that because everybody behaves. I mean, occasionally you'll have somebody blow up in the room. And what you do is tell stories about that person on your next job. After it happened, like if somebody heard the story of when so and so blew up. It just really never happens because it can't. And the showrunner can, although not anymore. You know, it used to be like you could throw hot coffee on your assistant, but you can't do that anymore either. So it's like it is truly like a kinder, gentler world, except that the same impulse to get ahead and ignore others, in some cases, still exists. And so everyone has their growth. I just learned, like, you know, I'm almost 22 years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. I say it pretty openly. We have a whole system based on, you know, not listening to the voice of self-will and listening to, you know, looking out for what can I do to make a situation better for others if I can, you know. But I think, like, you know, I don't like the humility that I preach for writers is a very practical humility. I don't see anybody succeeding as a writer. And when I say succeeding, I mean writing effectively, executing an intention, writing something that a number of people can read and understand within the same world or framework. I don't think it's possible without a certain amount of humility. By humility, I mean respecting the work of others. And I don't mean just like Shakespeare and Paddy Chayefsky, but I mean, you know, in the case of my job, the other writers around the table, some of whom I think are more talented than others, you know. So, you know, if you talk to writers who write a pilot that people read, that people think is personal and interesting, and then go out, you know, they go out on meetings with showrunners and get staffed, which is really the route. I mean, there are other routes in television, but you rarely see, like, somebody writes a pilot, they've never worked in the pilot, and now they have a show. That doesn't really happen anymore. You know, it happened maybe 7 years ago, but it's not happening now. The route that I'm talking about, if you talk to those writers, most of them have read every single pilot that sold, you know, that their agency, you know, has on some portal. They read everything, you know. They know that they usually know the name of the writer of the pilot. They decide what pilots they like. They're aware of what is out there, and in a humble act of understanding that this is a competitive business where part of our job is to become informed about what people are doing and how they're doing it, you know.
Yeah, I'm always stunned working in the world of books when people who want to write say they don't read, because it's so baffling to try to imagine understanding just, you know, how stories work, how writing works without that. But also, like you said, just knowing that there are other people out there, and understanding that there is this breadth of humanity that you are participating in. I think, you know, one thing that is interesting about what you were talking about with regard to writing a pilot and then getting staffed on a show, because I think there is a misconception, especially here in LA sometimes, of I'm going to write the perfect pilot and that's going to like skyrocket me to fame in, I guess, Lena Dunham style. Where does that come from? Where did people get that idea?
Well, I mean, Hollywood is a kind of a mythic place, and it's only becoming more so in a way, you know, like, and I had it as a very young child. I thought of going to Hollywood. I thought what my experience in Hollywood would be like long before I ever visited California, you know. And because, look, I mean, for some people it's football or basketball. That I took a look at myself in the mirror, and I saw that was not going to happen, you know. So I think it's funny because I was just reading Jim Bouton's Ball 4, and looking at the intro, and he talks about why he wanted to become a baseball player. It's because he wanted to be a star, and he wanted people to come up to him and ask him for his autograph. And he feels a little he felt at the time of the writing, felt a little disappointed when he would go to a place and nobody recognized him,
Mm-hmm.
So, Hollywood is a place where if you're creative and unique, goes the idea, and you have good taste and have pizzazz, you get discovered and just brought into the VIP line. I mean, and I had this, I mean, I don't know if I told you this story, but I had this idea as a teenager, as like a middle teenager, maybe even a late teenager, that if I got into a good college, just got into a good college, I was like a car at the car wash, and I would just get pulled through life. And I would, at the end of college, I would be given an excellent job that drew on my talents, and a wife would be offered to me, with a wealthy father who would bring me, I don't know, and I get like, where I get this, I got this from movies, you know what I mean? Which is where I spent, my afternoons on weekends at the movies. So here I am, raised on movies with this idea, and what I learned is it's nothing like what I thought, because what it's really like is it's hard work. You get battered until you realize how to work hard. It's a mentor, finding a mentor who will read your work, be honest with you about your work, and having the presence of mind and the humility to do exactly what he or she says, because that's the way to keep your mentor being your mentor. All they want to do is be listened to. As soon as you fight the mentor, the mentor leaves. They say if the student is ready, the teacher will appear. But if the student rebels, the teacher will disappear. So it's like you're being groomed in this system. I'm not saying this is the only way. Occasionally someone writes an incredibly beautiful personal piece that just somebody reads and says, this is fantastic, and they have a job. That happens occasionally. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes they're the best writers. They're just natural writers. Usually the natural writers, the really natural writers who are crazy, and they experience the shock of what is this? These people are people are awful or lying, or and then they have to perform, meaning that they have to concoct a way not to be honest in a room of you know what I mean? It's crazy. Like everybody, and everybody's got a mishigas. It's a bunch of crazy people. Some are crazier than others. But my point is that the best strategy is to keep writing, to find someone who you respect, who's worked a little bit and knows what they're doing, and do exactly what they say. Beg them to, let you be their protege.
Well, I think we all forget that, especially in the qualitative arts, writing, painting, whatever, the difference between great and very great is really small, right? Like it's really hard. Like I could love a book that you hate, or you could love a TV show that I hate. It's very different from this hedge fund straight up made more money than that hedge fund last year. And so it's clear, like they're doing something right over there. And I think that it's easy when we're in our own heads to think, well, I can just write something that's so good that it will be undeniable. And the chances of that are basically zero as far as I can tell.
It's funny because getting back to the hedge fund. Okay. So say you do that, say you write that thing and everyone says, wow, this is really amazing. Should we buy this? And then what they'll do is they'll have you in, and then they'll study you when they're talking to you, and they'll try to figure out can this person pull this off?
Right.
Can they bring a group of people together? Can they communicate to this group? Can they keep this group happy and creative? Can they deliver scripts on time of the quality of this pilot? All the same questions. I don't know about finance, but it's corporate. the same questions that an executive vice president who's looking for the head of a division, the widget division, would
Mm-hmm.
do when they bring in, Charlie, and they say, "You've made a beautiful widget. What is your plan to make 10 million of these every quarter?"
Mm-hmm.
Because our people in China or Russia, they eat these things up. We need them. If we miss a delivery, it all goes wrong. And so it's really a business. And I think that's what's shocking for a lot of writers, many of whom have real talent, are just surprised that consistency, reliability, accountability, calm under pressure, all these things which, um, you just never thought they were qualities that you would have to have as a writer. When I was in graduate school, this is really embarrassing to admit, but we were, in my first year, we were assigned Aristotle's Poetics. And I remembered that I had a copy somewhere on my bookshelf, and I went to it, and there it was, and I started reading. And I read the first 50 pages, and I was like, this doesn't seem very much like poetry at all. And I finally looked at the cover and realized that I was reading Aristotle's Politics. And the reason I tell you that is, like, it took me 50 pages in to even ask the question, is this really the book they meant to assign? Like, at the end of the day, everything we do, because money is what drives it, ends up being almost like everything else.
Mm-hmm.
We just get
Yeah.
to do it in different ways, and then different skills get used,
That reminds me of one of my favorite movie scenes ever is in Men in Black, when Will Smith has gone in for the entrance exam and they've not given them any place to like write. And he finally is like, God damn it. And he pulls the table over and there's this loud screeching sound, right? And he just decides, like, well, there's a table, but it's not within my reach. I'm going to change this situation and work on it. Whereas everyone else was just like, I guess I have to just like write on my hand or whatever else it is. I do think that, yeah, it is that humility of understanding, like, maybe the fact that I'm uncomfortable means that I should change something about this, as opposed to I'm just going to please the people along the way.
Yeah, I mean, or accepting that being uncomfortable, discomfort is the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And the sooner you realize that you're constantly being asked to do things outside of your comfort zone, and that's actually where the gold often lies.
Mm-hmm.
When you're jostled. You know, I was talking about confidence before. Somewhere between confident and completely open to new ideas, confident in your own ideas, and yet completely open. And when I say completely open, like, that is to say, considering the most outlandish ideas. That's, I think, that where you want to be as a writer and as a showrunner and as a member of a writer's room.
Mm-hmm.
Feel like,
Let's get into some questions from our lovely audience. I assume you're lovely because I can't see you.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I can't see, and nobody's camera enabled.
No, it's just you and me, Paul. Come on.
It says there's 50 participants.
Yeah, they're.
Let me ask you something. Is there really anyone on this?
Do you think this is a simulation? We're in. I
don't think it's a simulation. I think it just says, where it says 50 participants, there's a way to load that in.
That would be very kind of
doing that because you sense that I need
that would be very kind of me to be like, all right, we're gonna preload this Zoom call with 40 extra people, and then there's really only 7. No, there's 47 people listening to you.
You think everybody could unmute themselves really briefly?
No, we're absolutely not going to do that.
Me?
Can you just check the chat, Paul? Be an adult and go over to the chat where everybody's telling you how much they love you.
No, whoa.
There you go.
Has logged off. That's funny.
There you go.
So he was here. Oh my gosh, all these like little, I think I'm gonna cry.
All right. Well, while you're crying, let's get a question in.
Okay.
So Tracy Fuller wonders, what happens when you don't agree with the other writers when working on a scene?
Well, that happens all the time. So um, when you're so the, there are many ways to disagree with other writers. There are many opportunities to disagree with other writers in a room. That would happen in the room. That is to say, when I'm working on a scene, when I'm writing a scene, I'm alone. I'm at home. So here's the thing. I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to go meta for a second. Sometimes there are factions in a writer's room where some people like some people more than other people, and they would be inclined to support one writer's vision because they like that person's vision. They generally won't. I don't like to think that anybody will bump on someone's vision because they don't like that person. More likely, it's somebody would support someone and say, I totally agree, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen. That said, I mean, it's hard to answer this question in the general. For example, in season 4, which is a long season, so it's actually going to come out in 2 shorter seasons, is sort of a seasonette 4 and a seasonette 5. But there's a long arc with Wendy Bird, a main character. She does something fucked up. Okay, I'll say that she does something that's fucked up, and it's the kind of thing where we sometimes disagree on what it means, whether it's she's having some kind of a break, or she's doing it. She has a more manipulative agenda. So I know I'm being vague because I want to give you something that's live and current that we're talking about currently. But I can't give you any more information except to say that it's what she does is very fucked up. Okay, very fucked up in a creepy psychological way. Now, in that case, we can disagree about how to proceed based on disagreeing about what exactly is going on. I find that to be really fertile. Like as somebody who doesn't want to just put tent poles and then figure out in detail as we go, I want to know a piece I want to know a detail now. I don't care where it is in the season, whether it's in the episode we're breaking or in the future, that I need a detail to sort of ground me in a character's sort of place in the world or their headspace. And the thing is, everybody needs a different thing to feel grounded or connected with either a character or a storyline. So part of it is just needing, like, sometimes I'll say, like, I can't even conceive of this thing that you're pitching in the absence of some grounding event in the present. So sometimes it's just an abstract thought. Sometimes it's, I'm just trying to remember. Yeah, I mean, like, we were going to kill a baby in season 1, and some people were aghast. Aghast. It never bothered me killing a baby. It's like, it's just a television show. But I think, I will say this, as we get to the end of this show, because we're writing the end, we've already talked about the end. I know what the end is, but I can't tell you. But I will say that when you work on something for 5 years, the end takes on a significance, because I feel invested in the idea that I'm saying this is the way the world is. And we've had a number of arguments about whether or not it's okay or moral, or um, what it says about society, or what it says about the way we look at society, by ending a certain way, by letting the bad guy win in a certain way, or lose in a certain way. So, I mean, the truth is, every day we disagree. We disagree. I hope that was like not rambling and completely useless. But
It
no,
it
that's the way the sausage is made. Really.
Beth wonders, do you have any suggestions? And I like the meat and potatoes nature of this question. Do you have any suggestions on how to approach a prospective mentor?
Yes. I mean, it helps if it's not completely out of the blue. You know what I mean? It helps if you know them a little, or know someone who knows them, or have met them. But I
Mm-hmm.
will say this, that anyone who approached me, who sent me a note, for example, that mentioned my work and was really smart about what you like about my work. So I would say, like, don't think about approaching a mentor, and be critical of his or her work, thinking that he'll think you're brilliant
Mm-hmm.
and want you in his or her world. I think you want to let a mentor know that you're serious, that you've done a lot of work already, but you're at the point where you feel like you really want to go. You really want to get good. That you're serious, and you're serious about a, a, a life as a writer. Because it really takes decades to become good as a writer. I don't know anybody who's consistently good who hasn't been at this for a long, long time. And you know, and letting a mentor know that you feel that way, that you understand that, is helpful. I would also say, like, if you ever meet a mentor, I would know what they've done. I wouldn't want I wouldn't. I don't think it's right to expect the mentor to give you his or her bio. It's very
Mm-hmm.
impressive. Like I said, that the young writer who ends up staffing, they almost always read everything that's out there currently. The student who really is serious about a mentor, knows the mentor's work, has read everything, or as much. It's a pretty big ask. So you should be really clear. And the other thing I would say is, be really honest with yourself about whether you really like this person's work. I mean, the truth is, start at the top and ask yourself, who is the best at what I do, and why, and really set out to meet that person. I think it's a great thing to do. Make sure you really like what your mentor does. Otherwise, it's going to get wobbly and weird, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say, don't just grab somebody who happens to be famous, but whose work you don't necessarily like.
Yeah.
Gail wonders, whose writing makes you humble?
I mean, currently,
I think we can go anywhere we want with it, Paul.
I mean, I can tell you that, like, occasionally some of the work on our show, there are a couple of people whose work humbles me, occasionally, and that's nice to be able to say that, and to be able to show up and see them in boxes every day.
Mm-hmm.
For inspiration, I read like a variety of people. I was first humbled by the work of Harold Pinter, the English dramatist, and then by David Mamet. I don't think this path is necessarily a unique one. I remember seeing the film Network, and feeling my jaw drop at the end of it. It's just sort of a tone, and just a presentation of just a world, and a confidence in a vision that really changed me. I set out to read Paddy Chayefsky's plays, screenplays. I did that with David Mamet, having seen Glengarry Glen Ross, which begins, John, wait a minute, John, listen to me, John. And then you're seeing that on stage. When I saw it, I'm paraphrasing, it's not exactly that, but when I saw an actor do that at the beginning of a play, I remember at intermission, I ran into the lobby where they had the script, and I opened it because I didn't know you could write that way, So I'm not sure if humbled is the way, like inspired, but humbled in the sense that, well, I'll say this. I think it's really important to feel, as a writer, to feel like you have something to say, to keep pushing until you feel like you have something to say, and to be honest with yourself if you don't feel like you really have something to say. I feel like most young writers don't. It's not that they don't have anything to say, they don't know what they want to say, but that's the journey of getting older and realizing that you have something to say and what it is. But I feel like it's important to be able to believe that you are the best writer writing, otherwise, how can you have the power and the clarity of vision to get down with these characters that you either created or been handed, and listen and hear them and know truly that's what they're saying to each other, or walk into a room with them and have them see what is there and say, that's what's there, and that's what's there. And to do that is to play a kind of God, right? But the other side of that is to be inspired by these people who've done it before or concurrently, who do it so beautifully. So it's like, again, it's this balance of intense confidence, because it's absolutely necessary to be the composer of this symphony, to feel like you know what notes you want, and also to realize that there are so many teachers.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
And y'all got to listen to a great one. Paul, thank you so much for hanging out with us. I appreciate it. I learn something from you every time we talk, and I'm grateful for the time.
Thanks, guys.
Everybody, Paul, is there a way that people can pay attention to you? Any sort of social media outlets that you participate in or use?
No.
You just got to watch Ozark. That's the best way to pay attention to him.
I mean, you can you can call producers and say, are you hiring this guy? Do you know this guy? You should know this guy. And then let me know that you did that. And when it all works out really well, I'll make sure that, I will say this, that not just for me, I didn't know this when I was younger, but if you see an episode of television, for example, or a movie that's written by someone, you can go and find everything they've ever done and go watch all that stuff, which is a great thing to do. Whether you intend to seek them out as a mentor or not, just to see the continuum of their work. But I hope I continue to be employed and that you can keep watching stuff that I work on. I'm trying to save the chat. How do I do that? There's a way to.
I haven't the foggiest of ideas on that.
Wait, let's see.
You work on that, Paul. I'm going to let you go and talk to our audience real quick.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.